crime is up 23% in the city totally. Violent crime is up 2%. In your view, why is crime up in the district?
Yeah. So when you look at those numbers and you talk about, why it's up 23%, as you mentioned, on the property crime space, the large majority of that has to do with a national trend that happened with Hyundais and Kias, vehicles being stolen. I mean, we're up just like a lot of other major cities across the country in that space. We try to work with communities to mitigate that as best we can, handing out auto theft prevention devices to help in that space. But specifically when you look in the space of violent crime, and you talk about violent crime being up about 2%, really at this point in the year, 4 months into the year, it's really kind of hard to gauge what that's going to look like by the end of the year. Last year we started out with an uptick, and during the summer months when crime generally goes up here in Washington D.C., we saw some very low lows, and we ended up with a 7% reduction in crime, a 10% reduction in or 7% reduction in violent crime, a 10% reduction in homicides, and 4% overall reduction in crime. So we're still in the fight. DC is a resilient city. I'm a resilient chief. I'm from this city. The communities here are resilient, and we still got a lot of months left in the year to really persevere through.
Sure. What strategies are working and what strategies aren't working from your minds?
Yeah, I think the things that work, anytime we do things where we engage community, you will always hear me ask for communities' help. I believe that good police work, I believe that technology, and I believe that strong evidence, and I believe that community support, those are really the key ingredients to solve any case, whether it's a homicide, whether it's a robbery, whatever it is. If you have those ingredients, those are the things that contribute to successful closures of cases. So working with our federal partners, that has paid huge dividends as a force multiplier for us. We have federal agents from ATF, FBI, DEA, U.S. Marshal Service, U.S. Secret Service, day and day that work hand in hand with the Metropolitan Police Department and our carjacking task force, violent crime suppression division. They work with us hand in glove. In a space where there's a shrinking workforce, we don't have the officers to put out there for these different task forces. People want to see officers on the street. So one of the ways that we're able to really work in that space and to be more impactful is to leverage our federal partners. So that is working. The things where I think that I'd like to see a lot more, if you want to call improvement, the thing where I really would like to continue to see us grow in the space of our community engagement. I want to see more officers out of the cars. I want to see more officers taking advantage of those 600,000 calls for service that we have each year. Those are opportunities to engage community members. Sometimes it's at the worst time in their life. Their car got broken into, a shooting, a homicide, or robbery, but it gives us an opportunity to be impactful in that space when we engage those community members. And that's really one of the areas where I really want to see us just knock the ball out of the park, if you will. In addition to that, I want to find ways. Right now we're not able to be in the schools as much as we'd like to be because of legislation, but despite the legislative restrictions, I want to find more ways for us to engage our young people. I believe that the young people in this city, I know it was impactful in my life as a kid, but our young people in this city, the whole narrative, they don't like the police. I mean, I just don't subscribe to that, because when I walk around these communities, with police officers, young people are showing all kinds of love to the police, and I want to continue to build on that, even when we have legislative restrictions that prohibit us from being in the schools.
And I want to get back to some of that too, but I do want to ask, what do you need on any level that will help you to combat crime? I mean, is it more federal prosecutors? You hear council people talk about that. Is it more federal resources? You talked about the feds are starting to kind of fill the gaps where you can't get officers there because you don't have enough officers, but where do you need the help?
It's all of those places, really. It's no one thing, right? It's not, if you just hire more police officers, if you just add more prosecutors, if you just change this legislation. It's all of those things, because it's all of those things that contribute to where we are currently. You know, this has been a slow drip that has happened over time. And again, to kind of keep things in perspective, really keep things in perspective, if you look at Washington, D.C., and you go back 15 years, and you look at where we were with crime, and you look at where we are with crime now, with the exception of homicides, right? With the exception of homicides, it's been less robberies, it's been less a whole lot of other things that have happened in our city, less motor vehicle thefts, less a whole lot of stuff. But, you know, that's not good enough as far as I'm concerned. So when we talk about what are the fixes, what are the things we need, would I like to see more prosecutors? Absolutely, because I don't want warrants having to wait to get signed. I want warrants signed immediately when we have enough probable cause to get a person off the street who has committed a crime in our community. Can we use more judges? Absolutely we can, because I don't want people waiting months and months and months for trials when otherwise they could be having their fair trial, determinations being made about incarceration or not. I think we need more opportunities for people who want to take advantage and don't want to be part of the street. I think that there's space to improve in that space. And there have been some small gains, I believe, in that area. You know, as we look in the violence interruption space as an example and look at people of promise, people of opportunity, people who may have had a bump in the road, but, you know, looking to change their path. You know, like all of those things are needed when you talk about seeing reductions in crime. But if I really at the top of the list is keeping bad guys in jail. I can't say it any plainer than that.
And is there a problem with keeping bad guys?
There is a problem with keeping bad guys in jail. I look at this every day, and most people only see what cases we arrest people for, or they hear about something terrible that happens in the news. I'm hearing about the cases where, you know, we have information about this guy, but we're lacking this piece of evidence. We don't have this witness to incarcerate this guy who committed this bad act in community, as an example. And when you have like those things kind of working against you, and you add to that, we have a system right now that really is in favor of allowing people to be released for committing violent crimes in some instances pending their trial. I think if you put a gun in a person's face, if you shoot somebody, if you rob somebody, and you do anything that's involved in a violent crime, that burden to prove that you belong in community should be on you and not on the government to have to prove that. And our system is not set up that way. So what do we get? What we get is when people commit violent crimes, oftentimes you see people with robberies, you see people who sometimes engage in shootings, despite a hold that might be requested by our U.S. attorney, right? Despite the fact that a hold is being requested, that person, there's still an avenue for that person to be released in community. And I think most community members don't appreciate that. I don't think most community members support that. But what will it take to really get that ball moving, to get that change to where we will have a system that is supportive of our community?
Right. Now, you used to be the captain of the homicide unit and the sexual abuse unit. That used to be your area. And those are the two areas that are spiking the most really in the city right now. How does that make you feel? I mean, you were ahead of that when these numbers were dropping, but they're spiking now.
So when you look at, for example, when you look at the sexual abuse cases, you know, the majority of the sexual abuse cases these are not stranger cases. These are known people. These are domestic situations, that kind of thing. I think it speaks to where we are in society, right? Some of the things that people engage in, that's very frustrating. Obviously as a law enforcement officer, but just as a good citizen, right? When you hear about, there's a case that went to trial recently, a sexual abuse case, as an example of a mother involving her like 9-year-old daughter, and that mother was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the sexual abuse against her 9-year-old daughter. How do you as a law enforcement agency prevent that, right? That's something that's happening in the home. Certainly where we have things that are stranger cases, those are things that you definitely want to focus in on. But the majority of the sexual abuse cases, if we're going to use that number to really focus in on, the majority of our cases here in the city are not stranger cases. It's either domestic or a case where the suspect is known oftentimes.
Mm-hmm. Now, in 2021, right before you became chief, you had said in an interview that you wanted to focus less on seizing firearms, but more on identifying and arresting people who use guns for violence. But yet, when I first came aboard here, I heard you talk about, hey, we got to get these guns off the streets. Was that the right strategy in 2021 compared to now?
The context is different. We're talking about, when I was talking about that, I'm talking about, it's not about just going out here getting any gun. It's about getting the right guns out of the wrong hands, right? Let's say, for example, you have a security officer who is off his, he works at this mall here, but he goes down here to the other place and to get a soda. He's out of the area where he's supposed to be. Technically, that person could be arrested with a firearm. Or let's say the four of us are in a car and we get pulled over by the police. All four of us could end up going to jail. It's like I want to make sure that we're arresting the right people who have those firearms, that are committing crimes, who are using those firearms to commit crimes in our communities. Those are the right guns. The wrong hands are these people who commit violent crimes, who continuously show up on report after report. The average homicide victim, average homicide suspect in the District of Columbia arrested 11 times. 11 times. Prior to them committing a homicide or becoming a homicide victim, right? So that is something telling. And I want to make sure that we stay focused on that. So what happened as a result of what I said? The number of firearms that we recovered the first year, right? The number of firearms that we recovered the first year spiked. And then the next year, 2022, 1,000 firearms more than what we got the previous year. Why? Because although we changed the focus to focus in on the individuals who are out here holding guns, committing violent acts, it didn't decrease the number of firearms that we were taking off of the street.
Let's switch gears here.
Sure.
Republicans in Congress, they've been invoking your name quite a bit, right? Talking about, hey, Chief Contee says this is how crime should be dealt with, especially when it came to the criminal code. They use your argument to also disparage City Council as well. How does that make you feel about having your name invoked in Congress?
Well, I mean, people invoke my name all the time, man. And at the end of the day, I'm going to speak the truth as I see it. I'm not a politician. That's not my role. I'm the chief of police in the nation's capital. My responsibility is to talk to community members about what I believe are the issues and the things that contribute to crime in our city. What are the resources that I need? That same information is communicated to the mayor. That same information is communicated to the council. So everybody at least are operating with the same information about what the chief needs. Now, how people decide to weaponize that, to use it for whatever political purposes they do, that's not my role, and I don't play into that. I'm going to speak the truth, whether I'm sitting here on the corner with you in Alabama Avenue, whether I'm before Congress, whether I'm sitting before City Council, whether I'm on the phone in a closed meeting with City Council members. I'm going to say the exact same thing, and my truth is not going to change.
But they're also using your name and using some of your words to act like crime is out of control in this city. Is that a fair assessment?
Again, I think that people will weaponize the words to say what they want to say. I just said to you, last year, what did we do? We ended up 4% reduction in overall crime, 7% reduction in violent crime, and 10% reduction in homicides, right? And you compare us again, looking back 15 years ago, crime is much lesser now than where we were then, with the exception of the space of homicides. That has been creeping up, but homicides is less than what we had the previous year. People will take that and weaponize it, and that's why I hate to use statistics when we talk about crime, because here's the thing for me, right? You really have to look at how people are feeling, and that's what I focus in on. What do people feel? And as long as people are not feeling safe, we got a lot of work to do. So they can invoke my name, whoever they are, to say or to use it, whatever it is they want to say, oh, crime is out of control, it's not out of control. I think, they try to use the same comment to make both arguments, which is why you can't use statistics, right? People, any one is one too many. Any one homicide is one too many. Any one shooting is one too many. If it's your child in your block where you live, right, it's one too many. And I think that as we look at crime across the city, you probably have heard me say publicly, people respond differently depending on their proximity to the pain. When it's over there, people feel one way. When it happens to maybe one of your staffers or in one of your blocks where you live, that feels a lot different and people respond differently. So, I'm going to just stay focused on crime. I can't worry about the noise. I'm not going to worry about how people may try to twist my words to further their agenda, their narrative, or whatever the case may be. I'm concerned about the citizens of the District of Columbia, and that didn't just start for me during an election cycle. I've been working in this city, protecting this city, caring for this city, living in this city. My family is here in this city. This is home to me, right? This is not a place that I just happen to pass through on my way to work. And this is a real thing for me. So however, again, people want to want to twist those words to mean whatever they want them to mean, they can I'll let them do that. I'll stay focused on fighting crime.
Will you go and testify before the House Oversight Committee? Is that something that you're interested in doing?
I've heard I've been asked, and I'm assuming at some point I'll probably show up on somebody's table, but again, my truth doesn't change. Wherever I happen to be, here, there, city council, it really doesn't matter. I'm going to say the same thing. I'm going to say the same thing that I've been saying. I'm going to say the same thing that I've been saying to you, because it's real lives behind this, right? These things that happen out here, the shootings that people don't hear about, the shootings that happen when the cameras don't show up, when channel 5, 7, 4, 9 don't show up at 3 o'clock in the morning and there's a shooting that happens. Chief Contee is there in a lot of those instances. So, I'm going to keep focusing on the crime and focusing on the people, the real families behind these crimes, these numbers that people keep talking about. Whether it's up or down, if it happened in your block, does it really matter?
Right. And still on that same vein, the Attorney General of Virginia has jumped into this debate, as you know, and made comments about a resident of Virginia who came in to DC for a concert and ended up dead, and also invoked your name. Do you feel like that some of this is perhaps dog whistling, where you've got some of these white politicians who are talking about this predominantly African-American city? Does that trouble you at all, given that you're from here?
I think that people, again, are going to use whatever words they can use to try to make whatever point that they want to make. We're talking about the surrounding jurisdictions. The majority of the guns in the District of Columbia show up from Virginia. It shows up from South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia. Every place except for the District of Columbia is where the firearms show up from. So I think that there's enough that we can all do. And when you look really nationally in the space of carjacking and looking at violent crime and what's happening, it's not a DC thing, right? It is not I talk to major city chiefs all across this country. Tomorrow I'll be with major city chiefs, and the discussions are the same discussions we're having here in Washington, D.C. If you look at carjackings and other violent crimes in some of our surrounding jurisdictions, they're having their challenges too. So again, it's not just a D.C. thing. Sure, we're very transparent about what happens here. We tweet out everything. We post it on our website. We do all of that stuff in the spirit of transparency. But again, as opposed to pointing fingers, I'm more interested in what are the solutions people want to bring to the table. Bad stuff can happen anywhere. What are the solutions people are willing to bring to the table?
With him, I know he's talked about trying to meet with city district officials. Would you be willing to meet with?
Well, I'll leave that to the politicians, man. Again, I don't know if that's a elected position or, quite frankly, again, I hear these names of different people, man. I'm the chief of police in Washington, D.C. People know where I am. People come and see me. We'll talk about whatever it is. My truth is not going to change. I'm going to keep on saying what I need to say. As long as I'm sitting in this seat, I will continue to do that.
Could the council be more helpful in this crime fight?
I think that there are things, and I've shared those things with council members, things that I think are not particularly supportive of focusing on violent crime. I've shared those things as we went through this process of the criminal code reform, and what are some of the things there. As an example, when they were, there was discussion in there, or there was some added stuff in the criminal code reform about the second look at. I'm sorry, I just fundamentally disagree with a person, regardless of what crime they have been charged with, after 15 years, a judge not being able to consider that when it comes to making a determination about their release. What the judge would have to consider is what the person did during their time of incarceration. I'm sorry, if my brother, my sister, my cousin, my mother was abused or assaulted or robbed or whatever as a result of that, in the time that they were the time that they received as a result of their sentencing was whatever it is, then that's what the expectation is. It really flabbergasts me to even think about, why are we so inclined to look at trying to, reverse the tide for people who have violated our communities? What about the people who have been victimized? What in all of that are we doing for them? What things in that criminal code reform, in any of that space, what things have we done that have been supportive of people who have been victims of crime? I want to put more of our effort, more of our dollars behind those people, as opposed to people who have violated our community trust. There's studies that show, there was a recent study that showed that violent offenders with guns recidivate at 68%. That's higher than any other offenses, but we're talking about criminals with guns in our communities. And I don't want to make it easy for them to be back out in our streets committing violent acts.
Was vetoing the criminal code revisions Was that the right decision by both Congress and the president?
I think it should have been handled as a local matter. In the city, it should have been dealt with before we got there. The same information that I've said to you, the same information that I said publicly is information that was said before we even got there. These things are not helpful. These things do not contribute to community support. And decisions were made. I'm not the policy maker. That's not my job. I can tell you what the vibe of the community is. I can tell you what the pulse of the community is around some of these issues, and it's not what's reflected in the legislation that was put forth. So there were decisions that were made, and I think now for all of those who were in support of or not support of, that's just decisions we have to live with. We have to live with the decision that was made with respect to the size of our police force. A decision was made despite what the chief said. Hey, look, we shouldn't be in a space where we're not hiring police officers. Yet we went almost a year without hiring police officers. And now, where do we find ourselves? At an all-time low. We haven't been this low as an agency since the 1960s. And now, hey, look, those responsibilities for the police department have not changed. People are asking, we want to see officers in our community. They still want a reasonable response time. They still want officers to handle all the special events we have happening in the city this weekend. The Japanese Festival, the Cherry Blossom Parade, the Emancipation Day Parade, Capital One Arena, we got something going on there. And anything else that's happening in community. So, I'm just going to give people the information, and ultimately those who make policy, those who make law, they have to determine what it is they're going to do with it.
You were appointed by obviously Mayor Bowser. What's your relationship with her? Has she been supportive in your crime fight? Are you all on the same page with your crime fighting strategies?
She has been very supportive since the day that I got into this position. The mayor has been very supportive of law enforcement just as a whole. Her question to me is always, what do you need, Chief? It's not to dissect, what it is the chief need, and I said this, recently. It's funny to me that we got people who've never put handcuffs on anybody that want to tell me like how many police officers we need or don't need, right? And that's not the mayor's question. Her question to me is, Chief, what do you need? And from there, she's pushing to, okay, let me get you what you need. What do you need to hire? Madam Mayor, it's tough out here to hire these things, whether it be a hiring bonus, whether it be these things. And there are things in that space as well that council were supportive of. And I'm appreciative of that. I really am very much appreciative of that. But to your question, she's been very supportive, nothing but supportive since I've gotten this seat.